Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. As testing continues in Barcelona, multiple teams have had lots of positive takeaways from the last couple of days, but there is one team undisputedly setting themselves ahead of the pack right now. Mercedes have been ominous in recent days, not just the top-end lap times they were putting in today, far beyond what anyone else has been capable of so far around this Barcelona circuit, but also the long runs, the consistency. Supposedly the other teams are terrified of the W17 right now. Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Thanks for all the new support on the channel over the last few days. Let's dive right in, because yesterday afternoon there were lots of key talking points, such as this picture that Natchez puts out. This is Isack Hadjar's car on the back of a truck after going into the barriers at the final couple of corners. This was a pretty big incident, and we can actually see by the image here, well, his car in the barriers right there in the Tech Pro. Now, that car is destroyed, and this is another angle of it. What was particularly remarkable, if you guys watched any of F1's highlights on this yesterday, is that in their highlight package, F1 said, oh, Hadjar just had a small off, which I found quite remarkable, because obviously they had the footage of this, but it was not in the video in the same way that it could have been, and much of the other footage has been. So yeah, it's super strange to me, this intention to make sure everything is positive. It's like, well, look, somebody crashes, surely we talk about the crash. The driver's okay, the car is not okay, and that is a key talking point. But I'm not really sure why this whole thing from F1 about like, oh, everything has to be super positive all the time. This is a big story. Hadjar was in the wall, and F1 downplaying it is strange when everyone knows it's happened. It's all over social media, and it's a big talking point how Red Bull can turn around from this. Look, let's not forget, Hadjar crashed in Melbourne before the race had even begun at the start of the season and still had a phenomenal rookie year. So it's not like, oh, it's over yet. But yeah, the fact that he was in the wall, obviously not ideal, especially because these cars are very new. You can see that the rear suspension, the rear wing, has been totally destroyed. It's not completely totaled, but it's far from optimal, given that there's not infinite amount of spares for them to put together in these cars. So yes, I don't know why F1 are going down that route, but it's not clear exactly whether it's driver error or whatever. The car could have given up on him. We don't really know. It's possible that he just was a bit too optimistic in the final couple of corners. Of course, also these cars can be a little bit tricky on the power, certainly in damp conditions, because they've just got so much torque because of the massive electrical engines. Now, Hadjar's crash could prevent Red Bull running again. There's been some debate on this over the last 20 hours or so as to whether they will actually be able to get back on the track. Laura McKee says the difficulties came after a very, very positive day. So as I said at the start of the video, there's lots of positives to take away for many of the teams. Some less so, and we'll discuss those in a second. But Red Bull should be very optimistic. Their power unit seems to work. That's a major step. They've done plenty of running, but it's not all been ideal. They did have a good day. They put Max on the track and just did a load of experiments really with the car. But then Hadjar put it in the wall, which was tough. They're certainly not on track today. They may get on track again at some point. Dr. Rob says that he's spoken with some people at Red Bull and the analysis of the damaged parts is complete. Spare parts are on the way. They're expecting to be able to run on Friday. So the plan is to get back on track on Friday, give Max a full day of running and take away as much as they possibly can. So it's not ideal, of course, but it's probably not the end of the world. These were the numbers for yesterday, because obviously it was damp, so most teams decided not to even bother. Only Ferrari and Red Bull got out there. Verstappen did 27 laps, Leclerc did 64 laps, and then Hamilton got 56 laps in the wet, effectively. Hadjar did 8 before the incident. So, yes, that was Barcelona day 2. Some key takeaways for Ferrari. Again, another solid day from the perspective of power unit reliability, although I will say it does appear there's only one team that's particularly confident to really turn up the power units right now. And, well, you've already guessed who that team is. Now, the SF26, though, did plenty of laps. Leclerc, 64 laps. Hamilton, 57 laps. These were the run programs that they went with. It's pretty clean for Ferrari so far. The track engineers say no major issues, it's all looking good. Is the car fast? It's another question. But yesterday, the key goal for Ferrari was to make sure the systems worked. They did loads of tests with the front and rear wings, the active aerodynamics. They were even testing the partial mode, which is where the rear wing is closed as in cornering mode, and the front wing is open, as in straight line mode. That is a setting which is sometimes deployed in wet conditions. That's the idea anyway, to make sure that the teams have a bit more downforce at the rear but can still use it in wet conditions to a degree, because otherwise the engines will cook themselves alive. They'll have no power. That's something that's worth considering. Speaking of the wet conditions, actually, there was a little bit of talk about how tricky these cars are in the wet. Apparently there's Italian sources saying in the rain these cars are totally unmanageable. I think that effectively means like undrivable. This is aligned with... Now, okay, I think the teams can make progress here. They can make very intelligent decisions on how they execute with regards to the power deployment of the battery. But that seems to be the problem, that there's so much torque and the tyres are thinner than before, that actually driving the cars in the wet, like in the proper wet, is a real issue. Now, and in terms of safety as well. Now, of course, it's kind of skill issue, right? Like, just get better at driving, maybe. The drivers, of course, are the best in the world, and they will adapt to this. And I think the teams have probably things they can do about it as well from the pit wall in terms of managing power deployment. There has been some argument to say, well, why not if in the wet you just turn off the electrical motor and just run the ICE? Maybe that'll be better. Probably that would be true, but that's not going to happen, is it, realistically? So that's some concern. There's also some discussion about the spray. Of course, this is last year's car. There's some discussion about the spray, whether it's better in the wet this year than it has been. Right now, we don't really know. It's probably not enough better to make it much more raceable in the wet, but, you know, time will only tell. Hamilton says, intense but productive first day, especially with mixed conditions. We got good mileage, gather a load of useful information, which is important, no major issues. So, look, it's positive for Ferrari and for many other teams. There's only a couple of teams that are having a real stinker out there. Of course, well, one or two teams that aren't even there, which is a problem. Hamilton, though, says, this is the biggest change that I've noticed in 19 years in Formula One. It puts everyone on the back foot. Whoever develops the fastest is the smartest, optimizing the time and the energy deployment and development will be the ones at the top. Gives everyone an opportunity, though, which is good, and Ferrari might need it. But Hamilton's pretty clear that, yeah, these cars are very different to drive than we have seen in recent years. Now, how much positivity is there around Ferrari? Supposedly there's people in the paddock that are stunned by the reliability of the engine. The performance looks strong. Apparently this car is like a very old spec version that they put together last autumn. So, look, don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of the optimism around Ferrari. You know how this sometimes goes. But nonetheless, Maranello might be cooking up something special, popcorn emoji. It's certainly there's some positives for Ferrari to take away. Less true for Williams. Supposedly, they are cancelling the physical presentation of their car. It's so cooked that they're not even going to be showing us the real thing. They're going to do a virtual presentation of what it would look like instead. That seems problematic. Again, there has been some pushback on the idea that they are massively behind, they're massively overweight. But it's obviously not going to plan, is it? Otherwise, they'd be there in Barcelona, which they are not. There is one team that's trying to get there in time, and that's Aston Martin. And by the time you guys are watching this video, the AMR26 should have touched down in Barcelona. We'll discuss that in a second. This is our first look at the McLaren. It's blacked out, no papaya on the car. The number one McLaren hitting the track for the first time today, getting some laps in. So, you know, they're not behind the curve, but of course Mercedes, they were out literally 9 a.m. on Monday to make a bit of a statement, it seems. By the time they've got to Wednesday, they've moved quite a long way through their program. That is not true for McLaren, so in terms of performance, time will tell. We can see a push rod on the front suspension again, which is definitely a key talking point. They've also got these massive winglets on the front wing. We've seen that, I think, on the Haas, but no other team really has displayed something quite like that so far. So interesting to have a look at the McLaren. Again, yeah, the front wing has caused quite a lot of discussion so far. There will be analysis, I'm sure, of this car done in due course, especially when they reveal it properly and we get to see maybe some developments and better pictures in the coming days that we have not really had an eye on so far. But you can see the airbox and the shape of things at the back. There are some similarities to some other teams that we have seen already. But interesting, because they are the reigning Constructors' Champions by an absolute landslide, but they are not considered right now favourites for this year's title, and part of that is because of what we have seen on track over the last couple of days. They're not far away, obviously, but it's the Mercedes that has been the point of concern for the rivals. So McLaren were just doing a couple of laps, they were coming back into the pits, just testing some things out, making sure it's all okay. But Mercedes are slightly ahead of the curve. And according to Natchez, who was there, he says Mercedes are doing an incredibly long stint. And I'm 99% sure they are pushing the engine harder than on Monday. And we'll see in a second some of the results of that in the lap times. The other thing to say is on the rake of these cars, because rake has been a talking point. That is the rear of the car being higher in ride height than the front. There are benefits to that in terms of more airflow to the diffuser to generate more downforce, but it has some downsides as well. We did wonder how this year's regulations would go when it comes to rake. We're not going to see quite pre-2022 rake where the Red Bull would be really up on its haunches, because of the ground effect is still somewhat relevant, but we are going to see some level of rake, and to be honest, what we have seen is pretty much what we predicted, right? Some rake, but nothing crazy. The teams do seem to vary it. The Red Bull and the Racing Bull seems quite substantial. Even the McLaren, at least from this angle, it might just be the shadows playing a few tricks, but it does look like there's quite a lot of rake in that McLaren there. The Mercedes, probably less so than the others, which is generally what they've preferred doing pre-2022. So there might be something to say on that as well. Now, Bearman hit the track, but then in the Haas caused a red flag, I believe, because, well, the car came to a halt and people were like, oh my God, here we go. The Ferrari power unit has finally had enough. We've finally got a reliability issue and something that's worth looking at. Look, there will be reliability issues this season, but apparently it was not a power unit issue. There was a sensor that went wrong that triggered the power unit to go into like safety protection mode and shut itself off basically. So that's the talk anyway, that it was actually okay. They were able to get back out on track with the Haas with no real issues. However, that was not the case for everyone. This was Nico Hülkenberg's Audi once again trudging its way back to the pits after seemingly another issue with their power unit. Now, this shouldn't be a huge surprise, but it's obviously not ideal because they've tried to do a fair bit of running in this test, and after issues on the first day, they then came back out today, and immediately they're back to the garage, not really having done all that much. So they've been on track a few times. Every time they've had some issues, they did a few kilometers. Apparently the engine was broken. Today it was kind of the same thing. Bortoleto only got a few laps in on Monday as well. So yeah, not looking great for Audi. It's not a huge surprise. They've got a brand new power unit. But to be fair, Red Bull have seemingly done a pretty killer job. Audi so far, more concerns on their side. So yeah, Audi not in a great position. Williams not even there. Aston Martin not there yet. We actually see a little image of it here because the Racing Bulls also had an issue. This is the Audi actually going past the Racing Bulls as it was already slowing down with a problem. That caused a red flag as well, but there was apparently a minor mechanical issue. They got out on track again. Lindblad was doing plenty of laps. So yeah, that's how it looks right now. Again, the rake in this image looks pretty different to what we recently saw, but again, the images aren't great, are they? So what can we say? The key takeaway, however, when we look at some of the lap times in the data, has got to be on this Mercedes. It's been the key talking point. Yes, Red Bull, Ferrari, their engine's looking really good, but Mercedes, to a certain extent, might have even gone under the radar in this regard, given the fact that their reliability so far has been absolutely bulletproof, and their speed has been ominous, to say the least. They also have a very interesting front wing concept, and we get to see it in proper action the last couple of days. The key thing we mentioned is that they've connected the front wing to the nose cone on the second plane, which means only this top plane element moves during the active aerodynamics activation, which is on paper giving up a lot of potential straight line speed if you also moved the second element. Every other team, as far as we can see, has connected to the front element with both of the back two going down. But Mercedes, it's difficult to exactly understand what they're trying to do here in terms of airflow and everything, but there's obviously a reason why they're doing this, and no other team is doing it. And they've got this interesting actuator setup as well. So very, very interesting to see where this goes. Teams, of course, are taking notes. But also this morning, Russell was just banging in the laps. He'd done 72 by the time Colapinto had done 41. Colapinto, of course, also in an Alpine Mercedes powered. Behrman had done 16, 10 for Lando, 5 for Hülkenberg. At that time, Colapinto had the fastest lap at a 1:19.1. That then changed very swiftly because George Russell, after completing 92 laps in the morning session, put in his fastest lap of a 1:17.5. Now, this appears to be on the softer compounded tyre, so they did properly crank it up, Mercedes. But yes, pretty impressive stuff. Now, look, the pole time last year was in the 1:11s, so they're not close to that yet, but these cars are going to be significantly slower than last year's cars anyway. The track conditions are very different, the amount of pushing they're doing and the engine levels and all this stuff is very different. So the quickest time before this, I think, was Hadjar with a 1:18.1 on the Monday, and now Russell goes into the 1:17 mids, so that's quite the lap, and that was certainly not the fastest lap that happened on the day. This was a quote coming out of the Spanish press after Monday, and after today, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some similar statements being made. People close to the circuit tell us that Russell is now the fastest of the day. This, of course, was on Monday because he wasn't actually the quickest, but the teams believed the Mercedes is terrifying, not so much because of the lap time and the speed, but because of the long runs. And this is the thing. We're talking about, oh, they did this many laps. This was the fastest time. But we're not really seeing what the long run data looks like, how metronomic they're able to be, maybe what sort of times Russell's putting in on the race run laps. Those seem to be the digits that are really concerning the other teams, and the level of the reliability as well. And then, after doing 92 laps in the morning, Antonelli goes out this afternoon, bolts on a set of softs and puts in a 1:17.3. Again, couple of tenths up on Russell. So yeah, there's clearly a lot of pushing going on out there right now, especially from the Mercedes camp. And as Natchez said earlier on in the video, it does appear that they are running that power unit at a higher power mode than other teams are doing right now and are comfortable doing. That could backfire, but also that shows a level of confidence, right? Because it seems that at least to a certain extent right now, Mercedes are looking at performance. There was a feeling that all the teams would turn up to Barcelona, they would just run their 3 days, make sure the systems work, and that's it. But Mercedes seem presumably very confident the systems are working as intended. They're now happy to try and crank the engine up a bit and start putting in some serious laps here. And look, that will only be true to a certain extent, and people will still, I'm sure, get quicker as time goes on. But if Mercedes are feeling confident enough to do that, it's a pretty scary sign, right? Given the integration of what we think is probably going to be the best power unit with the car and the package that they've put together, which seems to be running pretty flawlessly so far. We'll see what they do for the rest of the week if they take tomorrow off and then come back on Friday and see how that goes. But also, getting some performance running in Barcelona is very useful. It's a very good benchmark track. It has loads of different corner profiles. It will give the team, if they can do some proper quality running, like you almost would in a practice session in Formula 1 for the regular Grand Prix weekends, that could give them a lot of advantages for the rest of the season, whereas most teams, it still seems, are trying to just tick all the boxes through their program. Mercedes, are they getting ahead of themselves, or are they just very confident? Because they have appeared very confident from the moment we started to see a glimpse of that W17. So tweet your thoughts in a comment. The final thing before we finish the video, Aston Martin. They are reportedly turning up, well, they're meant to be there today, basically now. Their car is hopefully going to be on the track tomorrow. So they will apparently have a very aggressive side pod section. I can't wait to see this car. It's going to be so fascinating to see what they've come up with here. It may still be an early version. There was thousands of people actually watching this flight from Birmingham to Girona. So yeah, the Aston Martin flight carrying the AMR 26, people have been tracking it on Flight Track or whatever. And soon we're going to get to see a glimpse as to whether Aston Martin are in the Mercedes camp or whether they are in the Audi camp. So very much on Twitter your thoughts. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.